Hey everyone, welcome to Princess Gate. I'm your host Connie, and today we are finally here with the finale of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. It sucks that it's coming to an end, but I mean, it had to sometime. It's not a long series. Um, this series did surprise me though, but only in the way it was supposed to. It surprised me in the fact that, it had these twists and turns that made it very different from the comics and the original movie, um, in ways that I just wasn't expecting. See, I thought this was going to be a just typical adaptation, but no, it changed things up quite a bit, um, and I like that. I think that was a smart decision for a number of reasons, and it's worked out excellently. Um, but it didn't surprise me with its quality at all. See, when I went into this, I expected this to be really good. I expected it to impress me in terms of its quality. Like that didn't catch me off guard at all. Again, I was more surprised as to just what was happening. I mean, when you have Edgar Wright working on this series, you have the studios behind it, you have the same cast as the movie. Yeah, I expected it to be great. I mean, that was just kind of what was going to happen, basically. Um, excuse me. But like I said, what I didn't expect was the twists and turns it would take. And so it's become a very interesting series for me. Um, and now we finally get to see how it ends. Last time at the end, Scott returned and basically told everyone, yeah, it was me the entire time. I mean, it was the robot vegan portal with the Karayanagi twins, but in the end, it was me. I was the one behind all of it, and it's like, what exactly does that mean? Where is this going? We have 2 episodes left, so there's got to be something more to this. We know Gideon, or Gordon, whatever you want to call him, is plotting something with Julie now, I guess. We haven't seen much of the Kariyanagi twins, so what more is going to happen? How do we how do we close this out? Um, I guess we'll just have to find out. Um, but I'll mention in the afterthoughts what will replace this. But it's going to definitely have to be something for the new year because we're just not going to have time to get to it this weekend since this week is the last week of the year for the channel. Since next week we're taking off for winter break, that's going to mean a brand new show starting off the year in this slot. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. Um, I'll talk about that again in the afterthoughts, but for now, let's just get in with the reaction and see where this closes us out on. That was worded terribly, but yeah. When the screen fades to black, pause this redirect and go to the description below. Follow the link to the reaction, and after you watch it, come back here to the redirect and resume play. Because after it fades to black and then fades back in, everything from that point forward will be my afterthoughts and will contain spoilers to the episodes. So, that being said, thank you so much for tuning in, and I will see you at the reaction. And we are back, and we'll begin with spoilers in 3, 2, 1, now. So, in the movie, and I presume in the comics too, like, I haven't read them, but I presume that that's in there as well. But in the movie, there's a line near the end of the film um, that says, Scott Pilgrim earned the power of self-respect. And it's a big moment about where he realizes that he's kind of fucked everything up and he needed to better himself to, you know, uh, succeed. Um, with this, I would say it's more along the lines of both Scott Pilgrim and Ramona Flowers learn the power of self-reflection. They they realized everything they had been doing. They realized everything that they had, you know, messed up and worked to fix it. Ramona accepts herself and decides to stop running away. Scott rejects himself and decides to be better. And I think that is such a good way to handle this, because people have pointed out that there's that Scott and even Ramona, though Ramona isn't pointed out as much, but that they have toxicity in the original story. That there's a lot of issues there. And I've even seen people point that out, like, in the modern day, like, oh, this certain things here didn't, like, necessarily age the best in how this was handled. Could have been handled a lot better. And I think that was taken into account when making this. I think Brian Lee O'Malley, when crafting this series with everyone else who worked on it, decided he wanted to address that. He wanted to address that there was more introspection to be made, that Ramona needed to have some self-reflection as well, and that overall this needed to be different. Because there were unresolvable issues with the way that things were handled and the way things would have continued with these characters. I mean, we see how Scott becomes. How, as old Scott, he's... I guess you could basically say an incel. He never truly learned his lesson. He only learned a small portion of it and never got to really understand what was the issue in the first place. So when one little thing went wrong, he went off the rails and lost his mind. And Ramona ran away like she always has. She bottled up her emotions and ran from them, rather than, address them and actually do something and say something. She never confronted these issues, refusing to, in fact. And I love that this series addresses both of these sides. Because, again, if you look back on the movie nowadays, you'll see that Ramona had some issues too. Neither character was perfect and both needed help, but the movie and probably the comics, I genuinely don't know, mind you, but only really focused on Scott because it was about him. So the change of having this be just as much about Ramona as it is about Scott, in some ways even more, is smart. And in the end, these two working through their problems and all also helped others. This entire situation, this entire change allowed all of the evil exes to find their happiness, to find their happy ending. And, of course, in different ways. Like, Gordon and Julie are still evil, but they're evil together. They found each other. and they're genuinely in love. Roxy is acting as a cheerleader and friend to Todd, who's trying to be a vegan again, getting back on his vegan kick and moving forward. Matthew is a award-winning playwright and actor. You have Lucas as a star barista who's apparently really good at his job and getting a lot of attention. Like, he's getting a lot of customers, and that's really good for the coffee shop. You see the Karayanagi twins living their best life with Robot 01. You see everyone just continuing on. Even Envy is continuing on with her solo career now. Everyone gets to thrive because issues were addressed. Because self-reflection happened. It not only affected Scott and Ramona, but those around them. The people they've wronged. The people that they've treated as just roadblocks or enemies to defeat. And now they're all living their best lives. Even Knives Chow is part of Sex Bomb now. It's just working out for everyone. And that's a better ending than the movie gave us. This series is better than the movie. Unquestionably. Not just because of these themes and ideas that it gives to us, but even just from an entertainment perspective. Though the themes and ideas do obviously help. It's better. It's surpassed what came before. And again, I can't say on the comics because I haven't read them. But this felt like it in a way felt like Brian Lee O'Malley matured in all these years since he wrote the comic and all these years since the first movie came out, and wanted to make sure that, and I'm not trying to insult Brian Lee O'Malley by saying this, by the way, just want to make that clear, but it felt like he realized that there were some issues there, and he matured and wanted to fix that, wanted to improve upon something that, you know, he already loved, a work that he was already proud of, but could make better, but could improve on, could change in a way to make it, you know, just more, how do I put it? I say it all the time, I'm not great with words, but to make it more healthy, I guess you could say, while still retaining the video game inspiration and theming, while still retaining the comic book style, still retaining the cast that made the movie great. All of that is still here. It's still Scott Pilgrim. It's still a new take on the same series. It doesn't like veer too far off the path to where it completely changes what it's all about. It still feels like very much the same thing. And I think that was kind of necessary. It needed to feel like the same thing. Because otherwise, the message about how things needed to change and self-reflection and all, those messages wouldn't have worked as well if they changed too much. By having it still completely feel like a Scott Pilgrim series, even with the story being so different, it allowed it to come across better. And I can't help but praise that enough. I worded that terribly. I can't praise that enough. I can't help but love that. Yada yada. Um, there was so much in these two episodes with old Scott and pretty much right away, normal Scott realizing that old Scott was, kind of terrible. And it's very clear that things wouldn't end up the same way because, again, Scott met his older self. He knows what he would become. That's going to make you change your ways, just naturally. Especially if you don't want to become uh, that variation of your older self. It's like you're not going to just automatically become that just because of one factor. There's so much that goes into that kind of thing. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly. But that's kind of the point. So, yeah, this ended probably the best way it could have. And like, I'm here talking about the themes and ideas. I'm not really talking as much about the events because, let's be honest, that was the point. It wasn't about the fights. It wasn't about Ramona fusing with herself to become Super Ramona. It wasn't about any of that. The point here was what all of it meant, what all of it was working towards. And how these characters can evolve without changing who they are. They're still the same characters, but they've gone through a metamorphosis of sorts to understand themselves and others better and to be better. And in the end, that's all we could really hope for. That's the most positive outcome. Now, I do want to mention real quick, the ending almost feels like it leaves it open for a second season with the entire "the goose is loose motherfuckers" line, which, by the way, is still fucking hilarious. That is an amazing line. But the creators have said this is a one and done thing. That there are no plans whatsoever for a season 2. That this wasn't conceived with plans for a season 2. And that's partially because of Netflix being Netflix, But I don't think it needs anything more. In fact, I think actually giving more to this would kind of ruin the point. I feel like a second season would make no sense and would kind of hurt the overall vibe of this series. Having a little gag at the end with just showing that, yeah, Gordon and Julie are an evil power couple now. It's just a fun little gag. It's not necessarily meant to be taken as foreshadowing for a second season. It's just what those two are doing now. We checked in with everyone, so why not check in with them too? So, yeah. It just kind of makes sense. I've heard a lot of people calling this anime of the year. And I was on the fence with that because, specifically because of Pluto, which I feel is very underrated and not a lot of people have been watching because, let's be honest, the advertising for it, just like a lot of things on Netflix, was fucking terrible. Um, but everyone I've heard that I've known who has watched Pluto have loved it. And while I'm taking a break from it for the time being, I will be coming back to it because I've been loving it. um, but yeah, I was kind of on the fence because of that because Pluto is just so damn good. And while I haven't finished Pluto and can't rightly say like how it will be by the end and what I'll think of the full story by that point, I think like while Pluto may be, you could say, technically better made in terms of like just how well it's put together and structured and everything, I still think I'm just gonna like Scott Pilgrim better, just on a personal level. Because this series is just it's so good, so well crafted, so brilliantly put together, but also fun. Like even outside of just the themes and ideas and how well it's animated and written and characterized, it's like it's also really fun. And Pluto, while I really love, it's a Naoki Urasawa series. In other words, it's super serious, dark, and depressing. It's not what I would call fun. As great as it is, and as someone who's a big fan of one of Naoki Urasawa's other works, Monster, it's like I understand how like these shows are fantastic, but they're not fun, and they're not really meant to be. That's not really Naoki Urasawa's style with these shows. Again, they're meant to be serious. They're meant to be depressing. That's the style. That's the vibe it's going for. And that's awesome. That's genuinely great for what it is. But sometimes I just want a series that I can just vibe to, that I can just enjoy. Something that's not going to make me depressed. um, but can also have just as much theming and ideas in it as something that's more serious like that. And Scott Pilgrim definitely scratches that itch. It's that good. And honestly, I think I probably would call it my anime of the year. I mean, that's a very tall thing to say. That's a very bold thing to say. I was like combining tall order and bold thing. I don't know why. It's a very bold thing to say, especially like I would really have to think about it and remember everything that came out this year. Plus, then how do you compare it to like non-anime, like cartoons, Western cartoons and stuff, or live action stuff? There's a lot. And obviously, like, that goes into, like, where I would rank it amongst my reactions and everything. It's a lot to try and say that, but, I mean, this was that good that it's at least up for consideration for that. I just, I loved how everything was handled here. I loved how it was worked. And I'm really hoping that they don't end up doing a season 2, because again, I feel that would just be a disservice to this series and what it was going for. But now comes into play what is going to replace this. Now, because this is the last week of the year, we're more than likely not going to have any time to get to its replacement this week, meaning that what we're replacing it with will be starting with the new year, which makes sense unless I end up somehow being able to get to it. I don't know. Like I always say, it's kind of just up in the air with like, oh, what am I in the mood for and everything. So we'll see. Maybe I will get to it this week. I don't know. If I'm being honest, I don't know. But I've already known what I was going to replace this with because while I didn't want to like cut things short too early, what I want to replace this with is technically a priority show. Even though this last chapter only has like, I don't know, a special in 3 episodes or something like that. Um, so yeah, what we are going to be reacting to, maybe this week, but more than likely starting in the new year, is My Little Pony Make Your Mark. Apparently, from what is being reported, the final chapter, which is still not like 100% confirmed, and it's kind of really up in the air considering Tell Your Tale is continuing. I'll talk about that when we get to that because there's a whole complicated mess involved with that. But yeah, so that is going to be taking over for Scott Pilgrim Takes Off. Um, and I'm excited to get to it because I love it. It's great. I'm excited to see more Misty and Pip and all of them. Really, I really like all of these characters. Um, so yeah, that's gonna be the replacement. Um, it sucks that this is over, but I'm really happy with how it ended. So tell me in the comments below, what did you think of the finale of Scott Pilgrim Takes Off? And for now, thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Connie, and I'm signing off. See y'all next time.